Hi, it's Rachel Maldonado. Belief, human spirit, and desire to connect is the reason that I want to tell your story and mine. And I am with retired Lieutenant Colonel Steve Murray. How are you?
I'm great. How are you? Good to be here.
Yes. Well, tell me about this, Lieutenant Colonel.
Well, that's a long sort of story, so I'll keep it short. I spent my career doing information operations. I started out in an armor battalion, believe it or not, and then I got out of the armor world and went into the cyber world, and I spent the rest of my career doing cyber network intelligence, cyber defense, and information operations. And when I retired, I was battalion commander for a cyber defense battalion in the Army Reserve, which was fantastic. So
Yes.
yeah, that's me in a nutshell.
Is intelligence work, is it very niche? I mean, I'm sure it's broad, but also niche at the same time. How does that work?
Both. So it depends on what your specialty is. So you have folks that are linguists, you have folks that are focused on doing digital network intelligence to find, they call it the network threat hunt mission. So they're looking for bad guys in our networks. You have people that are doing specific analysis of specific parts of the world. You have people that are doing broad source intelligence to look for different intelligence patterns. You have people looking at terrorism. It depends on which specialty you're in. I was in information operations, which was really centered around command and control warfare and influencing populations as well as influencing leadership. So my focus was a bit different than everybody else. And at the same time, I was doing cyber defense. So you can imagine how busy that was. It's two different disciplines. So yeah, it was pretty interesting.
Was there a part of intelligence that was your favorite, or you were the go-to guy? You know, you were known for something specific?
So my specialty towards the end of my career was security operations. I wrote a lot of the playbooks that the Army was using, they're probably still using, to do incident response as well as handle advanced network operations, which is the threat hunting mission. And my team, when we started that mission back in, I don't know, 2008, 2009, it was really a niche business because we were trying to find nation states that were compromising and exfiltrating data from our networks. So we built the whole playbook around how to do that. At the time, it was called advanced persistent threat, which means that you have somebody that's been in your network for a very long time. And towards the end of that, we transitioned out of that, called advanced network operations, because there's so many nation states trying to get into our networks and steal our secrets that we couldn't just classify it as one threat. So, and then the other thing I was good known for was that I was kind of I guess the call sign I had was Hammer, because I didn't deal with people that were not collaborating. And if you understand the defense business, any kind of cyber defense business, it's all about collaboration. You have to coordinate, you have to collaborate. And I'll give you a case in point. If you're getting attacked, and DoD is getting attacked in a number of different places, let's say there's a denial of service attack. That's where they flood your network with traffic so you can't browse anything, you can't send any information. All you see is static in the lines. You have to be able to see if other agencies and other branches are being attacked at the same time, right? Because that correlation is the most important piece. Because if they're attacking, let's say they're attacking the Army branches, they're attacking the Air Force branches, but they're not attacking the Navy, then you want to see what that correlation means and build a defense around that and kick them out of your network. So I didn't have any patience for people that didn't want to collaborate, especially for some of the intel community that were, it's like everything else, right? In tech, you deal with a lot of ego. You don't have time for that, right? You check your ego at the door and you fight the fight, because we're fighting the same enemy and we're all on the same team. So yeah, that's one of the things I was known for. That wasn't. Let's just say I have a couple of notorious stories for dressing people down.
Oh, wow. You mentioned team, but then you also mentioned you're the hammer. How do you nuance the two?
Well, a lot of it is, so I'll give you one short story about it. So there's a number of different. We used to go to a joint exercise every single year. It was called Terminal Fury, and I would take my team, and we worked with the Navy. We worked at a Navy comm center, and here's this Army unit that drops in on this Navy comm center, and all my guys were cyber experts. I mean, every single one of them, and they were very good at what they do. In fact, part of the limitation the military has that the rest of the civilian market doesn't have is they have to grow talent, because when you go through, you're a generalist in the military, right? Because you do so many different things. Unless you're a linguist or you're a systems person, you don't specialize in anything. And that's especially true for officers. But most of the reserve and the guard, they do this in the civilian world all day long. So they know cyber defense and they know cyber exploitation. They know that intimately. So we showed up on at an exercise, and it was our training dollars that was paying for it. So we got the call to go support this exercise. We said, yeah, we'll use our training dollars to go do it. So cut orders and send everybody over there. And as soon as we dropped down on the headquarters, I'm sitting in front of 3 senior Navy officers, and they're like, yeah, we're going to split your team up. We're going to make you guys staff officers. And I just waved my hand and said, I don't work for you. I'm here to do this. This is the way it works. You want to call the general? I work for the general. Give him a call. Here's his number. Slid his number across the table. And I had 2 of my senior team members in there, and we walked out the room, and one of my buddies was like, yeah, I'm going to go call the truck driving school because I know we're going to get fired over this. So, but that's how you balance it, right? You put your people first, and you put their training first. The Army's had a doctrine forever and ever: train like you fight. Yeah. And that's an important doctrine, because you can't. Everything that we do, especially a lot of things we do in the cyber business, is muscle memory. You have to be inundated with it all the time to stay proficient at it. And with more and more of our warfare moving from kinetic to information, it's especially important to keep people on the pointy tip of the spear and keep them as proficient as possible. So you want to protect that, and you want to give your people the best training possible, right? And that's how you balance it out, is you know when to step in and say, no, this isn't going to work. I don't work for you. And in the military, a lot of times you're parsed out to different commands to do specific missions, because there's not enough of cyber resources to go around. So, and every battlefield commander has his or her own way of doing business. So when we fall in on those commands for whatever reason, we would still have to ingratiate their egos and play nice to a certain extent. But there's also times you got to be assertive and say, no, I'm not going to do that. That's not my mission. So yeah, there's a lot to that, but hopefully that gives you some context.
So do you find that when you know my team together, that's how we are able to have a competence level, and so I must keep them together? Do you find that is how you decide? You base it on ability and competence, and so you will go up against ego? How do you play nice and then the best outcome for your project? How do you sort of decide?
It's mission. Think of mission, right? What's best for the mission, and how do you accomplish that mission? Sometimes accomplishing that mission means parsing your people out to different parts of the command to help them move forward. Other times it means you keep cohesion and you keep the team together. Other times it means you split your team into 2 and you divide and conquer. It just depends on the mission, right? It's at the end of the day, what matters is what's the mission you're there for, right? In certain cases, and I'll give you a case in point, we used to send recurring missions to both Afghanistan and to Iraq, but we did it through we would send everybody to Kuwait first, and then we would parse them out in teams depending on what the issue was and what the mission was from that point forward. And in the military, we call it forward stage. So we would forward stage a team of 25. Those guys, that team they would either go in mass, or they would send 1 or 2 depending on what the mission was. Sometimes it was as simple as going out and doing an investigation on a server. That could be 1 or 2 guys. So other times you're going out to repair 1,000 laptops because they're all infected with malware. Other times you're going out to do analysis to figure out why certain things in the network don't work, and they're re-architecting a network. And other times it could be long-haul communication systems. It just depends, right? So there's been times where, when I first dropped into to Fort Belvoir in 2008, I took a team of 23 with me, 23, yeah. And we went out there because there was a major issue going on across the planet. 250,000 laptops were infected with a very insidious piece of malware. And we were brought in to help figure out how to remediate it. And, it took us the better part of a year to do it. But the requirement and the mission was spread out across multiple units. And my unit was literally, we were parsed out all over the world. And it was to help units fix things. So it just depends on the mission. Sometimes you say, no, that's not my mission.
Yes.
There's been several times where I, stood in front of general officers and got my ass chewed because, I'm vehement about the fact that, we're not going to waste resources on stupidity, right? So staff work is staff work, right? In the military, there's always going to be a staff officer that wants more minions around him. That's kind of the nature of the business. And I've literally, there's times I stood in front of the SecDef and said, sir, this is the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. What is wrong with you? And, fortunately for me, when I was, on active duty, that Secretary Gates was the Secretary of Defense, and he was a very, very, let's just say he was a smart man, and he was very, very patient, and he really wanted people that would give him the solution. He despised PowerPoint. He just despised it. And so when you stood in front of him, what he wanted to hear is, what's the problem? How can you solve it? And what do you need from me? So every time I stood in front of him, it was always the same thing. Sir, this is stupid. This is why it's stupid. This is what I need from you. And this is how I want to fix it. And he'd be like, okay, go do it.
Oh, yes. So because you're able to pivot, you pivot for what is best for the mission. Did you find that you gained respect? Even though the military is hierarchy, there's a lot of egos. Did you get respect because you stayed true to core, to mission?
Well, I think it's more than that, right? So I had senior officers that didn't like me. I had a lot of folks in the command that didn't like me. I had people that were actively trying to sabotage my command. That's politics, right? That goes with the business. The thing I was worried about, and the thing that motivated me, was doing the right thing for my soldiers, right? Taking care of soldiers. It's ingrained in your head when you join the Army. And one of the stories we're going to talk about is a guy who taught me that lesson. And it took me through my whole career. And his words still resonate today in things I do today. So, you make a choice when you go in the military. And that choice is, do I sacrifice my moral compass to make rank? Or do I stay true to my moral compass and gain the respect of the people that are important? And that's the people that are working for you. And I always stayed true to my moral compass because I didn't care about making rank. I knew when I went in the service, I was never going to be a flag officer. I never wanted to be a flag officer, because the last real command in the Army or in the Air Force or even in the Navy is as a lieutenant colonel. That's the last time you actually are face-to-face interacting with troops on a regular basis. And it's the last time you do maneuver. Everything after that, once you get full bird colonel and you're doing brigade command and you pin on a flag, you're a politician. And I never wanted to be a politician. It's not in my DNA to do it. You can probably tell that by my channel. When you hear me talk and do my sit reps, you can tell I'm not a politician. I don't have any desire to be a politician. That's just not my DNA. So yes. I made that choice early on, and I made it for the very same reason that I do today. And that is, the people around me. Your whole life is about relationships. I'd rather have good relationships than bad relationships.
Yes. I love that so much, because you made a decision early on. It's about connection, people, not who I report to, who do I work for, but who do I protect, which is a little bit different and very, beautiful. So I love it. And how did you get started on this, path to the military?
Well, I had a buddy of mine when I was in high school. My parents had split up. My dad was a raging alcoholic, and I didn't really have any direction. A buddy of mine, a good friend of my mom's, actually sat me down at his kitchen table. I think I was like all of 16. And he said, "You're screwing up. If you don't get your shit together, you're not going to graduate, and you're not going to go anywhere. And you guys are too smart to do that. So here's the deal. If you guys bring home at least a C and you get through high school, I'll pay for your first year of college. And okay, so I paid attention to him. I finished school. I got out of high school with, moderate grades. And then I went to college, and my twin brother went a different route. He went to aircraft mechanic school, and he didn't stay there. I stayed in school took me 5 years to graduate because I had to switch degrees because of the military. I was on a scholarship, and the military wanted a different degree. So I either had to change schools or change majors. So I changed majors. And so it added a year on, but it actually turned out to be a good thing. And, I learned so much from that guy. His name's Bob. He was, what's the best way to say it? He's like an older brother, but yet he's also a dad too. He did so many things. Like, I used to watch this guy. Like, he taught us work ethic. He taught us patience. He taught us how to communicate. He taught us how to do business and maintain customers. He taught us, how to be self-reliant. Like, he ran his own business. The guy makes, several $100,000 a year and has forever and ever and ever. He knows how to make money. He knows how to spend money. He taught me how to buy cars. I mean, just stuff like that you don't think of. He taught me how to manage a checkbook, stuff like that. Just, you're like, wow, this guy's, he's awesome. So that he was the guy that said, if you're going to go in the military, you got to go all the way through. And I remember standing in his driveway, and his old man was still alive, and he's poking me in the chest, going, "Whatever you do, you finish. You stay in for 20, you finish." He's poking me in the chest, and Bob was right there, and he's like, "Yeah, you got to see it all the way through." And that was a lesson, right? If you're going to do it, you do it all the way, and you see it all the way through, and you don't get, tripped up. A lot of people get tripped up in the military because it's a marathon, right? 20 years is a marathon to do. And if you want to do more than that, it's even more of a marathon. And it's not just for you, it's for your family, right? Because your family's there with you too. So he showed me through word, deed, and action that you're always impeccable with your word. You're always impeccable with your time, and you're always impeccable with your relationships. And all those lessons, I didn't heed a lot of them when I was first in college because, you're young, you're invincible, you're somewhat stupid. So, but he really taught me a work ethic, which later in life has paid me huge dividends because, his words resonated. When I got back from Iraq, I was running my own business, and it really resonated on, you got to be hustling. You got to be making connections, and you got to be making connections with people that are of quality. And that was the other thing too, is in his line of work, he routinely said, "I only deal with people that have a good moral compass and work ethic." Right. And I didn't know what that meant until I started doing that for myself. And you probably know what I'm talking about, right? You work with douchebags all the time that they're not impeccable with their word. They're stingy. They don't like to pay their bills. They don't like to, be transparent. And most of the people he dealt with were just like him, transparent, very ethical. They did things the right way, treated their employees well. And yeah, just watching him for so many years, I gleaned so much. So it was, he was a big influence on my life. And, in college, I met a guy just like him. His name was Dave. And Dave, how do you describe Dave? He's one of those kind of guys where he's always going 100 miles an hour. I don't know how to explain it any other way, but he's always going 100 miles an hour. And he was one of the top cadets in the RTC program that I was in. He was, 4.0 student. He was busy in both ROTC and sports and in clubs and school. I mean, the guy was he was moving at 150 miles an hour. And he knew that I'd had some background. At that time, I was doing counter drug work in the military because I was also in the reserves. And it was stuff that, I was seeing stuff that I couldn't put my head around. And Dave really, he's one of those kind of guys where he could sit down and he could actively listen, right? It took me years to figure out how to actively listen and not try and solve problems, because you know how it is when you're a guy, right? You want to solve problems, you want to fix things, and just tell me a few things, I'll go fix it. But Dave would actively listen, and there was one night we were sitting out and we were doing this fundraising thing where we were doing coffee at one of the rest stops, and it's like middle of winter time. We're all freezing our butts off. It's like 2:00 in the morning. No one's out there. I think the coffee was even frozen. And we were talking, and I said, I asked him, I'm like, how do you maintain this tempo that you have? Because you're up at 6, you run until 11 or 12 o'clock at night, and then you're back up again. And he says, I find things that I enjoy and I focus on those. Like, I love to study. I love to learn things. And I was the opposite. I hated to study. I thought that most of the college professors didn't have a clue what they were talking about, because I was working with Bob in real business, doing real things with real people that were really making money. And, I was looking at the textbook saying, none of this stuff's real. And so Dave, we talked most of the night. And the thing that I got out of that conversation that's lasted my whole life was, Dave focused on the mission, right? And his mission was to get through school and be a fighter pilot. That's what he wanted to do. And he worked hard to do that. In fact, I remember one summer we got just an opportunity to go fly backseat in F-16s down at Luke Air Force Base, which is right down here. And we were sitting outside, and we're just about ready to go on the flight. And he comes out and he goes, "You nervous?" I go, "No, man, I'm stoked. Let's go." And he goes, "I'm shitting my pants, man." He goes, "I'm scared shitless. I don't know what to expect." And I said, "Dude, just get in the plane, put the mask on, and enjoy the ride. These guys are professionals. Let's let them do the thing." So, the funny part was that was my first time seeing Dave in a place where he wasn't comfortable, and I was on the other end of the spectrum. And the moral of the story with Dave is that he died in 1992, just after we graduated. He took a bird strike in a T-38, and it stunned everybody in the class, right? Because we all thought he's going to be a F-15 pilot. He's going to be Secretary of the Air Force. He was just that guy, right? But the thing that I learned from Dave was that he never gave up on anything. I mean, I saw the guy took some gut shots, and he just never gave up, and he just got back up, and he just kept getting back up. Like, he was horrible playing basketball. Horrible. He had no rhythm whatsoever. Couldn't even dribble. Just terrible. It was painful to watch. Like watching Elaine dance on Seinfeld. It was that bad. And we used to ribbon bet all the time. But Dave spent 2 to 3 hours a day for almost 2 months out on the basketball court teaching himself how to play basketball. That's the dedication the guy showed. And you got to respect a guy like that, because he motivates everybody around him, just because he would do things to mastery. And, that was the other lesson, is you do things to mastery. You whatever you do, you figure out how to do it the best you can possibly do it. And you learn as much about it as you possibly can. And, I was always stunned at his ability to memorize things. Like, he could memorize. And when you get into a plane, right, it's a sterile environment. And he could get in a jet, and he could memorize all the checklists, right? And to give you some idea of what that looks like, just in one fighter, there's at least 3,000 checklists. You can memorize all of them. Now, there's 3,000 pages in some of those manuals for some of those jets. That's just operations. I fly SR-22s, which is a Cirrus, which is a high performance airplane, and it's a 2,500 page pilot operating handbook, and I maybe memorized 50 pages of it, the emergency procedures. So that tells you what kind of guy he was, right? He just did things to mastery, and he really was a kind guy, and people really they either loved him or hated him. But once you got to know him, you just loved the guy, because you realized he was loyal to a fault. He was dedicated, and he was, just like Bob, impeccable with his word. If he said he was going to do something, he would do it. I mean, so hopefully you're starting to see a theme now, right?
Yes. Yes. Well, your friend Dave, I really love that he always gets back up and always learn.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, very important dynamite combo to do
Oh yeah.
both.
And he was always positive too.
Yes.
He didn't focus on the negative, right? One of the things that I don't talk about enough in my channel is, if you stay immersed in the news cycle,
Mm,
the whole thing, especially social media too, it's negativity. Think about it. How much positive, even positive reinforcement do you get out of social media? Not a lot.
yes.
It's probably 90% negative, 10% positive. And I asked Dave one time, how do you stay so positive? He goes, dude, I don't listen to the naysayers because they're all people that they're not going to be successful. I'm
Oh
like,
my goodness.
that's a great
Wow.
answer. Yeah.
It's quite brilliant.
Yeah.
And it goes back to your other friend, Bob, which surround yourself
Yeah.
with competence,
Yeah.
with moral compass. Wow. So you got Bob and Dave, and these people are influential and are, they the two that influenced you the most?
Now I would say there's one other guy that I don't talk about him enough, and I don't want to out him here, but his name's Al. He's a full colonel. When I met him, he was a lieutenant colonel, and he was the battalion commander for 303rd Armor. And when I joined the Army, I didn't know anything about the Army. I didn't know. I knew even less about armor, but I didn't know anything about the Army. I didn't know anything about being an Army officer, right? Because I had started out in the Air Force, and the Air Force is such a corporate environment that I didn't know what it meant to be a dirt soldier. And there were several times where he, for lack of a better word, chewed my ass because I wasn't getting it. And the thing that took with me for years. His style was he would never dress you down in public, right?
Ooh.
He would bring you into private, and he would make it a teaching moment. And a lot of people didn't understand how he operated, right? And again, just like Dave, you either love him or hate him. But I learned to really respect him because the lessons he taught me were lifelong, right? So the first one was it was middle of the night, and when you're out doing training in tanks, you shoot all night long, right? Because you have a certain amount of range time, and so you have to rotate all your tanks through certain what they call tank tables, right? They have to shoot certain things to be qualified and stay qualified, right? And it's a very rigorous, and it's a very important regimen, right? And it's for just as much for crew safety as it is for proficiency. So it's middle of the night. He hadn't slept in 2 days, and I get this call on the radio, and it's like, hey, the old man wants to see you at his tent. So I go driving over there in the middle of the night vision goggles. I'm tired too. I hadn't slept in 24 hours. And he goes, sit down. He's smoking a cigar. He goes, I'm gonna tell you something you need to burn into your soul. Your people are watching you, even if they don't. Even if you don't think they're watching you, they're watching you, and they're paying attention to everything you do. And he said, the moment you know that they respect you is when your stuff starts to disappear. And I went, okay. Like, okay. And what he was saying is that he wanted me to keep doing what I was doing, right? Because I had already learned from Dave and from Bob that, you're the first guy awake and the last guy asleep, especially when you're in charge. And, when I started putting that into practice, I was missing a few pieces of that. One of those was, communicating, right? Communicating with him, communicating with the battalion staff. And I wasn't doing that, but I was taking care of my troops. And, he said, it's very important that you're the first guy awake and the last guy asleep, or the first guy awake and last guy asleep. And I went, Roger, sir, I got it. He goes, but you got to tell people that you're doing that too. So we know where you are, because nobody knew where you were this afternoon. I had to find out through the XO that you were working on getting the, gas moved out to the ranges. And then the other thing that he instilled in me was that, you don't wrap your career in your success. You wrap your career in what your people succeed at.
Wow.
And it was the same night. And then the last thing he said to me was that, when did he say it? He said it It was just before I rotated out of command, and he said it to the entire officer cadre. He said, war is not just you. War is your family too. You take them as well as you, and you need to remember that, because at the end of your career, if you don't remember to bring your family with you and take care of them, they're not going to be there at the end of your career. And it's important that you remember that your family goes through everything you do.
Yes.
You may think it's just you going off to fight and bring those battle scars home, but they carry them too. That's really profound. That's actually, he was spot on. And those lessons, I'm not kidding. Those lessons carry over to everything I do today. And if you ask anybody on the teams that work for me now, they'll tell you, all you have to ask them is one question. And that is, what is Steve's number one ethos? And they will tell you, family first. Always. Always.
Wow. I just love that, because I see that too. Family over everything.
Yeah.
Because it is connection and the relationships that you remember at the end. And so, that's what he was saying.
Yeah.
Care about people. Connection. Wow. Very smart. Al is very smart.
Yeah, he's a good guy. He's a very good guy. He's one of those kind of guys where he's really intense, but he's intense for the right reasons, right? And he demanded the best out of everybody around him. And nobody, one of my lieutenants go, sir, why is he such a hard ass? I go, because he wants you to do your best. He doesn't want you to come in here and just get by. Good enough is not good enough. Your best is good enough. Means when you walk in the door, check your ego, do what the guy tells you to do. He's trying to teach you something. And, this, you probably won't get this, but anybody in the military will get this. I watched him dress down the whole battalion one time, because a big deal in the Army is when you cross the line of departure, if it's at 7:00, that means the first tank is moving across that line right at 7:00, not at 6:59 and 59 seconds. Not at 7 o'clock in 1 second, at 7:00. And he goes, if you have to rehearse that 100 times, you do that, but you cross the LD at 07. He goes, is everybody with me? Everybody's like, Roger, sir. So yeah, he was too funny. He was just a good guy with a very, very strong moral compass. And when I look back at the way his career ended, the way my career ended, you can sit there and make up a lot of stories about why you left. But, he left on his terms, I left on my terms. Like, I didn't want a big retirement party. He didn't want a big retirement party. It wasn't a big deal, right? It was, I did my service, now I'm going to go do something else. And, I learned a lot about just myself and how to be an Army officer from Al. And I learned more about what was important about being an officer from him than I did from any of my other commanders. And I worked for a lot of good guys, a lot of very good guys. In fact, one of them was General Ham, or General Carter Ham. Well, rented lips today. General Ham was the MNC commander in Mosul when I was in Iraq in 2004, and then he was the AFRICOM commander when Benghazi went down. And he was summarily relieved because of his decisions to send people in Benghazi, and he was literally fighting with the administration to send Americans in. And he was an amazing guy, a very amazing guy. And I watched him put up with a lot of things. And every time that I watched him, I saw Al every single time. He'd take the beating, and then he would do what was right for his people. And he never interfered with his battlefield commanders. He never interfered with the operations of his staff. He let his staff make mistakes. He would counsel you in private, and then he'd say, "Okay, what'd you learn from this?" "Well, sir, this is what I learned." He goes, "Okay, move out." Saying it was a great experience, right? And Al taught me how to be at that level, and taught me how to interact with those kind of people. Which, sometimes I forget because, how it is. You've watched me on my channel. I'm very passionate about things. And, I watched him very calmly, quietly, and assertively. Like, I used to watch him on BTCs with the entire national staff, even the president. And he was always poised, very squared away. And I'm thinking, I'm looking at Al right there as a 4-star. That's exactly what I'm looking at. So,
Yes. Is it that when you check your ego and you do it people and mission, you can be a cut above everybody else?
yeah, typically the way that shows up is you drive the organization that you're in through action, right? When you bring in world-class players and they're doing world-class work, everybody starts to rally around them because they know who the experts are. And it's amazing how that affects morale too. When we walked into I think it was year 3. Yeah, year 3 at Terminal Fury. By this time I was a major, and I was actually running the Joint Network Comm Center at Pearl Harbor. It was a Navy operation, and here's this Army major sitting in a lieutenant colonel billet that's running the show. And I'll never forget the last night I was there, a Navy captain, which is a big deal in the Navy, right? Because a Navy captain's a ship commander, and they, lots of power in the Navy. And I had one Navy Master Chief and 2 chiefs in the room, and 2 Navy lieutenant colonels, which is a commander. And she walked in and asked me a question about a ship, and I don't know anything about Navy ships. So I'd been on a ship called the Bellwood, and it was retired. And so I answered her question. She leaves the room, and this Navy commander looks at me and goes, I don't think I've seen anything like this in my entire career. I go, what? He goes, she just walked past, a Navy captain just walked past 3 chiefs and 2 Navy officers and asked an Army major about a ship that was retired, and then didn't say another word left. But that's how it shows up. And the interesting thing about doing this at the joint level is you see how each service does it differently, right? And when you walk in the door and you have a better way of doing business, they start to adopt your playbook and your tactics. That's how it shows up, right? Expertise begets expertise, and it motivates people to be better. If you focus on the political fights, you don't get anything accomplished. You spend all your time doing petty squabbles. But if you walk in the door, keep your mouth shut, and do the work you're supposed to be doing, and you do it well, people notice. And that's what people pay attention to. They don't want to deal with the blowhards. They want to deal with people that know what they're doing. So
it's almost like when you conform for the wrong reasons to, get a rank or to, anything that's selfish, when you conform, you sacrifice competence. And it is only competence that you get true respect.
Yeah. In the military, yeah, that's true. It's true in the civilian world too. If you know what you're doing, people rally around you. But it's a combination, right? And this was the last lesson that Al taught me it's not just being good at what you do. It's being humble, and it's also being generous with your time to train people to replace you. And you train everyone to replace you. And the first time he said it to me, I'm like, okay, I don't get it. He goes, you're in a combat zone. My tank gets hit. The XO he's in an APC. The APC gets hit. Who's going to take over? Everybody has to know what I do. And I was like, oh, duh.
Yes. So it goes back to the check your ego, train people, be okay if they do better than you. That's what you want. You want competence for everyone around you. It's not like, let me shine the brightest. It's no, team shine. We all shine. It's for all of us.
Yeah. And more, I think the most important thing too is that, the thing that went along with that Al used to talk about was, look, my weaknesses, right? I'm a control freak. I don't like to, I don't like to play politics. I'll do it if I have to, but it's not my forte. And, he was very adamant about everybody around him knew what his limitations were. And he was totally okay with that, right? So being vulnerable with that, most people can't do it. Most people don't want you to know that, I don't know how to do that, right? And I think that's what's gotten me so far is my entire team knows that there's certain things I can do and certain things I can't do. Do I understand how to do that? Absolutely I do. Can I sit down on a keyboard and do it right now? No. But they know that, right? And they accept that because they know the things that I'm guiding them towards is big picture. I'm not wrapped up in the minutia, and they don't want me there anyway, right? They want me focused on the big picture. And that was a lesson that took me years to finally learn. And when I finally figured it out, it paid huge. I was at the Pentagon when I figured it out, and I realized, okay, I gotta lean on my team to do this stuff. I don't have time to do it all by myself. I got to delegate. So I started delegating stuff, and wow, what a massive difference in success for the organization. Because my team was more than willing to help, and they were actually excited that I was starting to delegate some of this stuff, right? Because you're not an island, you can't do it by yourself, and that's the lesson. And the other thing too is that when you start to trust people and you put trust in people, they want to earn your trust, right? And you want to earn theirs. So it's a two-way street, and it's some of the subtle lessons that I didn't pay attention to that all three of those guys are trying to teach me. And now I get it, right? So yeah.
It's like you cannot get respect unless they trust you.
Yeah.
And you can do
Two-way street.
more if you have team. If you check your ego, you're going to do so much more because you got this team.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love your stories, these lessons that you have accumulated through your entire career. And my last question for you is, what makes you feel alive?
Wow. I've been thinking about that since we talked before the show. The thing that keeps me motivated and gets me out of bed every day is that if I can touch one person and wake one person up to what's really going on in the world and to get them to critically think, that to me is success. That's the hardest part about the business you and I are in, right? We're trying to help people that don't want to be helped. And if I can help one person and get one person to see things differently and look at things critically, that's what gets me out of bed in the morning.
Wow, I love it. Well, thank you so much for sharing your stories.
Appreciate it. Yeah. Have a good day.